My name is Dusty Lanier, and I am a proud 2006 graduate of Wake Forest University. And I am so excited that our first year parents are here to join us tonight. It is my sincerest hope that your students' first semester has been off to a great start. And I have a feeling that after tonight, it's going to get even better. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have a question that's burning during our session, please use the Q&A function. No question is too small. We'll be fielding them as they come in. And if you have someone that you would like to direct them particular to, please note that in the Q&A function. Now, without further ado, I am going to introduce our host for tonight, who really needs no introduction. Andy Chan, who serves as the Vice President for Career Readiness and Engagement. He serves on the President's Cabinet, which is unusual for higher education and tells you how committed we are at Wake Forest University for your students' future success. He is well known in this field, and I'll tell you a few things that Andy probably won't mention that you'll be excited to hear. Did you know that over 98% of our class of 2021 was gainfully employed or enrolled in a graduate program within 6 months of graduation? We feel confident that the class of 2022 will have those same stats, and I have a feeling that we'll only get better from here. So Andy, why don't you take it over?
Thank you, Dusty, and it's great to be with you all today. We have a lot of information to cover for you to talk a bit about the first year experience, and in particular, how to think about going from college to career. And so I'm excited to have you be introduced to two of my leaders on my team. The first one who I'll be interviewing is Heidi Robinson. Heidi Robinson is the Associate Vice President for Personal and Career Development over our office that works with basically all of the students in the college, and all those first year students who are coming to Wake Forest. She also is a associate professor of practice, where she has developed our college to career courses that are 1.5 unit courses that are available for all students to be able to take. Really help them be able to learn the process to get career ready and be able to secure great internships and jobs, as well as great grad school outcomes if that's what they desire. So Heidi, you're here. Welcome. Glad to see you. And you want to say first a greeting to the parents out there?
Oh, yes, it is so great to be with parents, and we are so grateful that you have sent your students to us. We have seen tremendous engagement from this particular class of first years, and we're excited that we get to talk about that with you tonight.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. You know, one of the things that a lot of new parents don't really recognize or know about us is that we've been doing this for a while. You and I think have been in this general space of helping students navigate their way from college to career. Both of us have young adults who are now either, for mine, last one's in college as a junior, but all of our children are out and through the system. And so we really understand the process and have both been at it for actually more than a decade. In fact, almost a decade with us together and longer in terms of before that. One of the things we've invented and created is this whole idea of being career ready at Wake Forest. It's very unique. It's a sort of proprietary model. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about this process that we have to help students understand what they need to do to become career ready and why that's important, even for students who are not just going looking for jobs and internships. Sometimes they're thinking about grad school, like going to medical school or law school or something like that. Could you talk a little bit about that for a second?
Absolutely. So you've touched on the idea that our Ready 7 model was developed here at Wake Forest for Wake Forest students. And it is a 7-step process. And we believe that if students are working within each of these 7 realms, gathering skills, information, that they are not just career ready, but life ready. We begin with self-awareness and work all the way through leadership and life skills, wanting our students to go ahead and navigate career awareness, personal branding, interviewing, developing their own network, all of these different pieces that intuitively as professionals, we might think that seems evident, but it's a learning space. And so we walk students through that early and intentionally. In fact, it's one of the reasons that your students, your first year students' parents actually met us during orientation. So we work with all students, whether they are interested in government, nonprofit, or whether they are going to professional or graduate school, perhaps on the pre-med track or pre-business, all of those. And the idea is that in order to authentically engage in graduate school or any kind of professional life, you have to know yourself, you have to know your options, and you have to know the readiness steps that will actually help you be successful, not just now, but we want them to be ready for life.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. Now, we work with a lot of students. Some come to our office, some we go to where they're located. There are a lot of different ways that we engage. Can you describe some of the major ways that we are able to support students, whether they know where they want to go or whether they don't?
There we go. Perfect. And in fact, some students, I would just say, think they have to come to us only when they have everything together and they know what they want. And it's the opposite. We want students to be coming to us, to our office for coaching, for resume reviews. We want them to come to our events. We want them, our first years, at our wonderful career fairs, whether they're virtual or in person. We want them here when they are still exploring. So for our first year students, I would say having that first coaching appointment, coming in and going to we have Wake Your Resume, where students can come in twice a week and go through an entire clinic on creating their first college resume. We want them at our events, as mentioned, and then we go to them. We are in their classrooms and we go down to their residence halls and put on different kinds of events alongside their RAs. So one of the other things that I would mention is that if your student can go ahead and fill out their Handshake profile, that's one of the best ways that we can also go ahead and connect with them and invite them into our office for one of those different kinds of experiences that help them become more adept as young professionals themselves.
Yeah, speak briefly about Handshake. One of the things that we did during orientation was we had them all come into Wade Chapel. They got a really quick overview as to some of the things that we offer, including this whole idea of you're not being married to your major, which actually we should talk about that. But in particular, we brought up Handshake and we asked them to complete like their interests of things that they might be interested in. And they created these paper airplanes that then at the very end of the session, they all took together and threw in Wade Chapel. So if you actually want to hear a story from your student about, did I hear you threw paper airplanes in Wade Chapel? What was that about? That was us. And I think that'll be something that they might remember. But take a second, talk a little bit about on Handshake. I know you mentioned like in completing that profile, there's the interests and there's your resume, but also how does it work? Like, is it just a job board or is it a little bit more than that?
Oh, I just love talking about Handshake. So Handshake is a very robust piece of software that we use, and it is really comprehensive for our students in terms of career exploration, internship, job attainment, all of these different things, event registration, and connection to our office. So students complete a profile on Handshake. And what that does is it lets us know the kinds of things that they may be interested in, the kinds of opportunities that may speak to them. And the more we are able to know about their career interests and even the kinds of majors that they may be considering, what we can do is we can tailor information to them, emails, information that may go out through their Handshake profile about internships or opportunities that may interest them. The other piece, that's us getting information out to them that interests them. The second part about that is that's where they register to go ahead and come in for an appointment. It's where they register to go to an event like the career fair. And it's the other place where they will go to create searches for different kinds of internships and opportunities.
Great. Well, one big question that a lot of parents asked us just in our solicitation for questions was about this idea of the internship. And I know that you and I, and you share this with all of us about this idea. Well, internships is just one way to think about getting experience, and that the important idea is getting experience. Can you talk a little bit about that, especially the difference between what a first year student should expect or be looking for versus maybe what they're looking for later in their college career?
Perfect. Thank you. I actually love debunking the idea that first year students cannot get an internship, because they can. And perhaps even more important than the internship itself is to go ahead and think about getting professional experience. What we really want first year students to think about is a way to get meaningful experience and build skills. Skills are the language of employers. And so what we want our first year students to do is to begin to think about how they can get experience and skills, perhaps in a formal internship, but more likely in some kind of project or even in community service or organizations where they may be able to go ahead and build skills and experiences that we can go ahead and begin to leverage for them as they progress through their time at Wake Forest. It's really, in some ways, building professional experience is a little bit like creating a snowball. We want our students to start small and begin to roll up toward that big internship that they're all planning for between their junior and senior year. So between their first year and their sophomore year, we want them to find some kind of, perhaps it's a project that they do for a local community service. Maybe they're also working at a camp as a camp counselor. We want them being mindful of those experiences so that we can help them tell that story, highlight those skills for the next internship to come. So I would say experience rather than being stuck in this idea that the first year student must have a 12-week internship that sounds like something formal.
Yeah, I also like the idea. We hear about students who what they did is they just asked an employer, do you have any projects that you need done? And they worked on it for a short period of time. Or what happened is that they had plans to go on vacation with their family or go to a special program that they had planned, so they couldn't have the whole summer to do work. And so how can you do it in a shorter kind of way? And so that maybe that's another thing you talk about, just what are the types of shorter experiences students can get if they don't have the whole summer available?
I love that question. There's a website that is called Parker Dewey, and it is one of the best examples of one of the concepts that is called a micro internship. And in essence, a micro internship, sometimes called an externship, is a short professional experience where students do complete projects. They might complete 1 or 2 projects. It can be as long as a week, and it can be as short as 3 or 4 days. The important thing is that students go ahead and complete some kind of a project that helps them really sharpen some professional skills. And as much as we want them to gain those skills and experiences, we also want them to consider what they like and what they don't like. For our first year students coming into that summer between first year and sophomore year, it's a lot about exploration. I want an internship for our students to be something that helps them decide what they keep in their sandbox and what they go ahead and discard. And that's a really important piece as well as they make their way along in career exploration.
I heard a parent tell us recently at Family Weekend about this ABC acronym for his own daughter, where he said A would be any job, B is better job, and C is career job. And so the idea that your first job, whether you get it, internship experience, your first summer, your second summer, it's actually just getting something is actually a good thing as opposed to the perfect thing. So another idea that I'm wondering about is, a lot of times students are thinking that my major really matters. And until I actually know what I major in, I can't figure out what to do from a career standpoint. I'm really anxious about the major I choose because if I choose the wrong major, I won't be able to get employed. Obviously, as Jesse said earlier, of all of our students, all different types of majors, the percent of students who get jobs out of Wake Forest tends to be close to 100% almost every year within 6 months of graduation. So that's actually it's not a correct assumption, but maybe you can talk a little bit about why that's the case and how we help students both think about what they might major in, but also how that might lead to what they might end up doing work in.
I love talking about this part in particular because so many of our students do feel a tremendous sense of anxiety around choosing the perfect major. So much so that they believe they will have blown it and blown Wake Forest if they don't choose the right thing. And what we go ahead and emphasize is that we want them to understand that major does not in any way necessarily, there are a few exceptions, but it does not dictate what you actually do professionally. We like to direct students to a spot on our website that is called Explore Majors. And what we have compiled there is not only information about all of the majors at Wake Forest, but there is a link that says, where do communication majors go? And we have housed information for the last 10 years about what we call our first destinations. In other words, the first jobs or professional experiences of all the communication majors. And students can begin to sort that and to see that just because you are a psychology major doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be a psychologist. In fact, you might be great in market research. And so we begin to break down this idea that you have to necessarily be a finance major in order to go into financial services. And so we begin to go ahead and sort those things through them. And it's actually just as reassuring for parents to see that as it is reassuring for the student. And so I would highlight those things. The other place on our website, just to sort of, it's interesting to go through with your student, perhaps over Thanksgiving or winter break, is to look at a place that we have that's called the Career Marketplace. And just to let your student go ahead and begin to look at those different kinds of careers that are out there and gain a sense, not necessarily that they feel like they should do something or that they are committed to a particular career path, but just to see what raises their energy and what they become curious about, because sometimes that curiosity is a great thing to follow as they begin to explore both careers and majors.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. Another thing that you've developed and have really had a huge impact at Wake Forest, about over 500 students take our college to career courses every year. Can you talk a little bit about these courses, what they are, why they're so effective, and how students can be looking out for those kinds of courses and when to take them?
Absolutely. So I would say that one of the philosophies that we adhere to is early and intentional engagement in the career process. And the part about the career courses that is so helpful is that it raises this idea of understanding self, understanding careers, and then the steps that one takes to attain a career. We raise it to the same academic level as some of the other things that are on that student's schedule. So students enter the courses, and instead of the whole career awareness or career development process being mysterious, we can actually take them through the Ready 7 process in a classroom setting so that they begin to explore who they are, what kinds of careers appeal to them, and what kinds of careers are out there, how they begin to think about branding themselves and interviewing and getting the job, and then how they transition well into living a life of meaning after college and things like budgets and benefits. So each of the courses are 1.5 credits in half semester. And that means that students can take 2 in one semester, or they can add 1 in a semester as they make their way through. There are 4 in the series, and we have students begin taking them as early as their first semester, but we prefer that they go ahead and try to take the first 2 courses, which are housed in the Department of Education, either in the second semester of their first year or sometime before the end of their sophomore year. Because one of the great gifts that I think students receive through the courses is some idea about the kinds of majors that they're interested in and how those connect to the different kinds of career options that also are important to them.
Great, Heidi. I might have missed it. Did you mention, so that those are offered through the Department of Education, EDU 120, 220 are the good starter courses?
Yes, and it's funny, the students just call them the EDU courses, which always tickles me because we call them the college to career courses, but I'll hear a student say, yeah, I just told my roommate to take an EDU course. And I think, great, I'll be looking for that person.
Great.
So yes, that may be how your student references them.
That's great. Yeah, they're half semester courses, and students like them because they're the subject, as you can imagine. I'm going to ask you one last question. So, some students aren't sure about going to the workplace. They might be thinking about graduate school, law school, medical school, things like that. How do we assist and support students who are thinking about that? And also maybe speak to, if a student is going down that pathway, but then changes their mind and decides they don't want to go to grad school, like, how do we help those students?
I just worked with a student the other day who was thinking to themselves, I just don't know what to do. I know I'm going pre-med. I'm confident in that. How do I think about this whole internship piece? And one of the things that we talked about was research. And so for that particular student, doing research with a professor is a very meaningful professional experience, and all professors who are doing research love to have student support. So I would say that that is one example of the way that we can support students who are interested in graduate school or professional school. What I would say is helping them find meaningful experiences both on campus and while they are at home during breaks, and that will align with and make them a better or stronger candidate for the kinds of professions, whether they be pre-health or whether they are interested in pre-law, pre-med, that will help them as they move along that path. In particular, creating really strong relationships with professors who will be able to write letters of recommendation and working on experiences that help lead them to write a really compelling professional statement.
Yep, that's great. I know that you and your team also review many students' professional statements. You help them practice interviews. And then on top of that, you help them think through if they need to take a gap year after school because they want to do something for a year or two before going back to grad school. We can help them think about those things too.
We love that, and we support those students in ways that make them feel confident as they go through that process, just as much as our students who are heading out into the workforce.
Great. Well, Heidi, thank you for all that information, and thank Patrick for all of the links to a lot of different things we have available that parents can share with their students. I'm going to talk to Mercy for about 15 minutes about the market and a little bit about the business school, and then we'll come back to you to talk to the students, okay? All right. Hi, Mercy. Mercy Iadiel is our Associate Vice President for Personal Career Development and also Employer Relations. So her team works with all the employers who we do recruiting with. On top of that, she's our Chief Corporate Engagement Officer for the business school and many of the big partnerships we do with the corporations. Mercy is actually the one who's actually driving all that activity. Mercy and I have worked together for a long time. We worked at Stanford together, and now we're working here at Wake Forest. And so Mercy, welcome. Do you want to say anything, just say a greeting to the parents out there?
Well, hello, Wake Forest parents. It's great to see and be with all of you and to be with my colleagues and our students. Looking forward to our conversation together. We always have, big love for Wake Forest parents. Many of our parents are instrumental in helping us build these relationships with organizations. And so for those of you out there who have opportunities within your organizations and you'd like to connect about how you can hire Wake Forest talent, I'd love to talk with you.
Great. Can't emphasize that enough. We
That's
have
right.
really expanded the number of relationships and organizations that our students go to work with because the parents have been very active in helping us with that. So again, thank you to the parents out there who are interested in wanting to do so. Let's first talk about just the general employment market for college students. Mercy, can you share with us a little bit of the data and what you're seeing out there in the job and internship marketplace?
Absolutely. Well, first, let me just say and reassure everyone that the market is very strong, in particular for students who are graduating. So university recruitment is very strong. And there's a couple of different indicators that we look at to help us, really demonstrate how strong it is. So right now, Heidi mentioned this briefly, we have a handshake system, and in our system, we have over 35,000 jobs and internships listed today. And so what that means for our students is, particularly for first year parents, you're thinking about internships and what's out there. We actually have about 5,000 internship opportunities listed. Now, a lot of these internships are focused on sophomore, junior level internships, but there's other ways to get those internships, as Heidi mentioned. And so we're seeing about a 21% increase in our internship offerings this year. So that's super exciting and a good indicator for what's to come.
Great. And Mercy, are there any particular industries or career sectors that you see are particularly, voluminous in terms of hot and looking for a lot of talent right now?
Sure. Well, and I just want to reinforce that a lot of the different sectors are hiring right now. So this is one of the challenges that students may have, is trying to figure out how to focus. But I will tell you, there's about 5 to 7 that rise to the top in terms of consistent just strength with the number of internships and full-time offerings. If you look at financial services, of course, healthcare, nonprofit, IT consulting, education services, and health-related fields are all very, very top right now. If I didn't mention nonprofit, I wanted to say that too, because that's another area that always has needs and always is posting opportunities for Wake Forest students.
One of the things I find really interesting is, you mentioned these different career sectors. When a student comes to a school like Wake Forest, they're looking for a liberal arts education. They may have majors like communications or physics or philosophy. And
Yes.
those sort of academic areas seem very different than these career areas. How do you know the employers are open to hiring our students, because it's not like they're learning how to become healthcare professionals or
Right.
not even financial service. I mean, there are a few people who go to business school, but they're actually looking for all types of talent, marketing talent. We don't have a marketing like major per se in the college. Like,
That's right.
why are they interested in Wake Forest talent, given that it seems like there's a little bit of different terminology being used there?
Well, if you think about the landscape right now of just what's expected of us today, we have to really be able to learn very quickly. And so while there's a certain set of skills that, employers are looking for, academic background, for the most part, they're really looking for an all-around kind of professional, right? One that can come in, can learn information quickly, and be willing to continually learn and grow. And Heidi mentioned this earlier, which I couldn't agree with her more, is focusing on skills. It doesn't really matter your major. Parents, I know a lot of parents and our students feel like it does. For certain areas, I will say, if there's a defined career pathway, if you're going into accounting, if you're going into a real technical related career, then it makes sense to really align your academic background with that. But as I said, I think for early talent, employers are really looking for those who are what we would call all around utility players, can come in, do good work, and build skills as they go. And so I think that's exactly what you get with Wake Forest talent.
Yeah, and it seems like we do get that feedback from the employers about how they see our students who work at their firms and our alums. Very, very hardworking, great interpersonal skills, great team players. And just really, honestly, willing to learn quickly and get along with everyone. And so I think that we tend to really are very proud of our students in terms of their capabilities when they get out to the workforce.
Absolutely. And many of them are well positioned for leadership opportunities, Andy, because of their work ethic and what they bring to the table. And as we know, in leadership, you have to be willing to take on more and more. It's not about what you know, but it's about how you manage. And so Wake Forest students are definitely considered leaders within industry. And we're also proud of that fact too, that when it comes to promotions and those kinds of opportunities, our students are usually the first to be promoted. And we're excited about that.
Tell us just briefly a little bit about some of the types of organizations who come to recruit.
Sure.
In that I think, being in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, people might think it's going to be tricky to get, to a job in New York or in San Francisco or in Atlanta or things like that. And maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of the reputation we have with a lot of the top companies and organizations out there, and not just for profit, but also in the nonprofit sector.
Well, and anytime you start listing names, you're going to leave some folks out. So if I don't mention your company, don't hold it against me. Okay. Chances are they're probably hiring Wake Forest talent, but I want to give you some examples of organizations in terms of scope and industries. General Mills, Procter & Gamble, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey. We've got the World Relief Center. We've got U.S. government, jobs that people post for. You've got Abercrombie and Fitch working at their headquarters, Belk. And so there's such a wide range of both national and global brands that recruit Wake Forest talent. When I first started at Wake about 11 years ago, I do think we had that reputation of being more of a regionally oriented institution. That has really changed. I think the reputation of Wake Forest, as evidenced by the type of employers who hire our students, you can really see that national and at times global scope.
Great. Can you talk briefly a little bit about the difference between like how to get the job due to the virtual interviewing environment, and then also how to think about maybe the internship or work activity being virtual versus in person? Maybe
Sure.
just briefly, like, not to say that anyone's perfect either way, but just talk a little bit about some of the dynamics related to that what we do to help students be prepared for either working virtually or getting interviewed virtually versus in person.
The virtual interview process is here to stay. It's one of the main ways that employers are actually creating access for a lot of different types of students, so they don't miss talent as they go through this process. A lot of times when they commit to an in-person schedule, which many of them still do, it limits their ability to reach a broader group of students. So, and it's also very cost effective, efficient. There's many different tools and ways that students can do both pre-recorded interviews through a process called Spark interviewing, as well as when they're first time meeting a hiring manager or a team. Oftentimes that is now through a virtual means. And so we really work hard to get our students ready for both an in-person experience as well as the recruiting virtual experience. And I know my colleague Patrick, who's on this call with us, can share our link of resources for how we get students ready for that virtual interview. You asked another important question around how the work gets done. And one of the things that we have seen is that for this age of students, they really do like to be in person because it's a big part of their social experience when they start working. But there are still students that actually like some of that flexibility as well. What I would say from an employer's perspective is it really does depend on industry and the type of job. Employers are just as eager to bring students on site, and many of them are now, because they see, especially for early talent, having access to mentors, having access to people within the city in which they're living and operating is very critical to their development. But there are also students that I hear from that have tremendous opportunities through the virtual means as well. And their companies are doing a lot to keep them engaged in a lot of flexible and creative ways by having meetups locally within different cities, leveraging alumni groups to connect with students who may work at that firm. So regardless of if you're working in person or virtually, companies are really getting hit to the game, and they know that that in-person connection is always going to be an important part of their experience. And how companies do that, as we all know, is wide and far-reaching in terms of the types of ways that they're engaging their employees.
Great, thanks for that perspective. So I have two sort of quick questions and then
Sure.
one will be longer. So one quick question is, what do you think about there? You mentioned there are a lot of opportunities right now. Does it stay the same through the spring, or does it start to peter out? Like are there, especially for internship type opportunities, is it still, what's it like during the spring, even though, we know a lot of activity can happen during the fall?
Well, let me just kind of do a myth buster right now. There is no hard timeline really anymore. The lines are really blurring. So the reason why I say that is we are recruiting year round for full-time jobs, and we're also recruiting year round for internships. Now I want to talk just very quickly about where the differences are and why it matters. For organizations like, let's just say, investment banking, and I'm just using that as an example, that have rather large recruiting classes of analysts that they're bringing in, they tend to have a more defined and structured rhythm for when they will come and recruit. And for parents out there who have students interested in financial services and or consulting, the message is students need to get going now as a first year student. Even though they may not be interviewing in their first year, employers actually do evaluate how early students are engaging with their information sessions. And they actually have started to take note of those registration lists too, to figure out who they'll bring back for potential interviews when it's time for interviews. So it really does start now. If you're in these competitive spaces like investment banking and consulting, I would urge students who have that interest to go ahead and start engaging in information sessions now. In terms of the actual internship timeline, and we can, post this information as well, typically for investment banking, it's a year and a half early. So the way to think about it is, if I have a first year student, they need to be ready to start really engaging January of their sophomore year, meaning that's when applications start to come open. And then they start to apply and interview. Really, to be honest with you, we have applications open now in November for the junior internship that happens a year and a half from now. So it's a little bit confusing because it's so advanced, but I just want to note that for the more competitive internship opportunities, students need to be prepared to get ready at least a year and a half in advance.
Well, that was a good one. I totally misjudged your answer and thought it was going to be quick, but it was actually more thorough than I was expecting. So
Sorry.
thanks for the answer. I'm going to try to ask you another one that, if you can, sort of very high level, quick tips on anything students should be thinking about to make sure that if they want to go to the business school, they can. Oh, this is not a short question, but you have to answer it.
I'll
If
do
they, how to get to the business school, but then the other would be, if I don't end up going to the business school,
Sure.
how can I still actually get sort of up to speed on business skills so I can still do a business career?
Okay, very quickly, and you can test me on this. So applications start to open up the second semester of your sophomore year. Patrick can share the link to our business school application process. A couple of things to keep in mind is that GPAs really matter. So what you do in your freshman and first semester of your sophomore year can really make a difference in the competitiveness of your application. So we just like to let parents know that. Please encourage your students to apply early. We like to look at when applications come in, and all those things make a difference. If your student doesn't get into the business school, I really hope that you'll hear this as one of the things that you heard me say. It doesn't necessarily determine their career trajectory. You heard Dusty talk about our 98% employment outcomes, and really that's competitive even if you break out between business school and college. I mean, it's always like neck and neck there, right? So our students from the college are getting business related careers without a business degree. Okay, so just I want people to know that. The other thing is, for our summer programs, we have a summer management program, we have a sports biz program, and there's other programs, accelerators that go on. There is a website that features all of our business related programs that your child can sign up for. And Patrick's also going to put the link in there. And I would encourage you to go ahead and look at that now, because a lot of the application processes start this month.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mercy. There's also entrepreneurship as a minor, one of the most popular minors in the college.
That's
and
right.
then also there is, well, the master's programs that people can go to afterwards out of the business school. And then finally, there's the business fraternity, AK Psi, that is very popular among students, all students of all backgrounds, that actually can really help them get brushed up to speed on thinking about business careers, as well as there's a marketing club and there's a finance club and a journalism club. There's a lot of professional clubs
Club,
that
right.
students can belong to too. So
That's right.
thank you for all of that, Mercy. We're going to sign up. We'll come back about 5 minutes to the hour, and we'll pass it over to Heidi now to talk to our great students.
Thank you. I would just add one thing to the wonderful advice that Andy and Mercy just shared, which is that we also have a lot of experiences on campus. Students can go ahead and work for Campus Rec and do social media and find all sorts of different ways where they gain some of that experience. I have the unique privilege of introducing the folks who can tell the story best about becoming career ready, advice they would have for you parents, and the ways that they have been really crafting their own career story and guiding their own path while they've already been here. I am very delighted to introduce you to Ansley, to Dylan, and to Jaden. And if you all, thank you for turning on your cameras. I'm excited for everyone to meet you. Dylan is a sophomore, and Ansley and Jaden are both first years. And they all have a story to tell about how they have really begun a process for themselves. And so what I'd love to have you do first is introduce yourselves and your hometown and things that you've thought about either as careers or majors or things that have captured your attention here at Wake. Ansley, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Ansley Sothan, and I am from Lincoln, Nebraska. Yes, Nebraska. And I am planning on majoring in health and exercise science and minoring in entrepreneurship on a pre-med track.
Thank you, Ansley. Jaden?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jaden Barbier. I'm from New York City. And as of right now, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm interested in either finance or econ as my major. and maybe minoring in something like writing.
Classic Wake Forest. I like that. Dylan.
Yes, hi everyone. First, I just want to thank Ms. Robinson and my other fellow panelists for having me today. Just like Jaden, I'm also from New York City. I am a finance major with a double minor in entrepreneurship and bioethics, humanities, and medicine. So I know that's kind of like a mouthful, but definitely something that is interesting.
It is a mouthful and a schedule full, Dylan. That's what I hear right
Mm.
there, especially with registration right here. Well, I am excited for all of you to get to share a little bit about not only what you have done, but also sort of the advice that you might have for parents who are listening and things to be thinking about. You've all sort of identified things that you are curious about and interested in terms of majors and careers, and speaking broadly to students who may have different interests and those folks that you see in your residence halls and your classes every day and what you hear from them. So maybe I'll go ahead and start with Dylan as a sophomore. If you could kick us off by sort of thinking about how you got started in the OPCD and the things that you did that sort of moved you along.
Yeah, absolutely. So early on in my freshman year, I was introduced to Ms. Robinson and the OPCD through the Family Engagement Office. And so from there, I started meeting with Ms. Robinson almost bi-weekly. And we kind of built a relationship together and started working on both career things with my career, but also things at Wake. And so trying to figure out what I wanted to major in and minor in. And so those were two things that we definitely really focused on. So going off of that, freshman year, obviously school was on my mind, but also like a career was on my mind. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I came in really interested in finance, but also really interested in like biological sciences. So half business, half pre-med. And so I was able to work with Ms. Robinson and kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and eventually kind of went the business path. And so with that, we kind of, as a student kind of interested in both these fields, I really wanted to look for opportunities over this past summer that kind of found an intersection between both business and science. So we kind of used Handshake and we used other formal applications and kind of just research together and individual research to kind of find internship opportunities that found this kind of intersection. So really starting early is something that I would totally advise any student. Don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to start as early as you can. So
I will remember, Dylan, working on with you on that first resume. And I would say that was an important first step sort of for you going ahead and getting started. And then when you found your internship, it actually was through an unusual path that I think it's important for first year parents to hear. Will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. So basically Ms. Robinson and I did a lot of research throughout the year. Didn't really find anything in the fall. And so it kind of became springtime, and it definitely was on my mind. It was stressing me out a little bit. And so we started to do more research, and eventually I landed on a biotechnology hedge fund in New York that really interested me. So after exploring their website and company, I ended up noticing that a Wake Forest alumni actually currently worked there as the fund's head trader. So I sent him an email. We set up a phone call in which I was able to land a summer internship. So he was incredibly responsive, incredibly helpful, and it really kind of showed me the power of like the Wake Forest alumni network. So one thing that I would like kind of want to add and give advice to is, although it's like incredibly important to use Handshake and all these other formal applications, many jobs and internships are actually found in the same way that I kind of found mine. So my advice for both parents and students for that matter is that do not get discouraged if you don't find an internship that you're looking for immediately. If you're not accepted to one, if you can't find one that fits your major or your graduation year, which I know is kind of an issue for freshmen sometimes, or honestly something that just simply interests you, you have to keep looking, kind of explore your options, and opportunities will present themselves. And you kind of have to take advantage of those resources that Wake offers and that are kind of given to you. So really use those resources.
And that's all it was, is being brave enough to make that first phone call. And just to be clear, was that internship posted?
It was not, and it was posted nowhere. And I can also add to the fact that that was not the first call that I made that semester. And I made many, many calls before that one. So don't get discouraged and really keep being brave and kind of putting yourself out there and finding new opportunities.
I love that. And I love that you found it within our network. And just to emphasize how strong our alumni network is and how much they want to help our students. Thank you, Dylan. We may come back to you here in just a moment for some sage sophomore advice, but I would like to transition over to these first years, to Jaden and to Ansley, who have really been busy. And we talk a lot about being early and intentional and getting started. And I would like to hear from the two of you, because you really have done a lot when we think it was just August when you landed here. Ansley, would you like to go ahead and just kind of kick us off about what you thought when you were getting started and sort of what you've done thus far?
Yes, of course. So I was I first got started with the OPCD by being introduced to Heidi. And that was definitely my first experience of ever, I guess, professionally networking with someone, just because we realized that we both have connections to Nebraska, which I still think is very funny. But from there, I came to campus, and about the third weekend, Heidi reached out to me. She was like, okay, it's time for you to come in, get started on your resume. And as a freshman, I was like, oh God, like I'm a freshman. I don't need this right now. But, I went in and I got started on it. And honestly, I think it has been so influential in setting up my LinkedIn profile, setting up my Handshake profile. And it was definitely the one step that I needed to take once I got on campus. So just for some more information about my journey with the OPCD, about halfway through the semester, I realized that one of my classes was just not for me. So I dropped it. I talked to Heidi about this situation as well, and she was like, hey, perfect timing. One of my EDU classes is just about to start. So I joined her EDU 220 class, and from there, I'm here.
You are there, and you're already networking and reaching out to different people, which I love, because that is one of the things that students sometimes they're reluctant to go ahead and take that step. And once you have that first informational conversation, it just gets easier from there, and realizing people really do want to help you. Ansley, one of the things that you talked about was coming in to do that first resume. And I will add, you also went to your first career fair and you didn't have to. Will you speak a little bit about going to the events? Because there was, you weren't in a class then, but you went ahead, and though probably your roommate said, why are you going to a career fair? You're a first year. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So that was another, I guess, professional step that I didn't think I was ready to take, but I took it anyway, and I put myself out there. And I think it was a very beneficial experience, just because at the time I didn't have printed copies of my resume. So I was like, okay, how do I work around this in essentially like a preliminary interview? So I basically ended up telling the people from the various organizations that I had already given out all of my resumes. So if they would like to contact me, I will give them my email. And, that thinking on your feet was honestly very helpful. But just for the career fair as a whole, I thought that it was an amazing experience, just because I have a couple organizations that I can now reach out to and apply for internships coming up for this summer, which I'm very excited about, and definitely something that I am starting to work on now.
I love that. And I love that you already had a resume built before you went to the career fair. You had taken all the steps to get yourself right there. And it takes a lot of courage to go as a first year student. And that in itself, and having some ideas now about the kinds of things that would interest you, and building those relationships with recruiters was really important too. So hats off to you there. I'm going to transition up to Jaden, because Jaden, you have also been to a couple of different kinds of career fairs. And if you could sort of talk about where you were when you came into the OPCD the first time, and where you sort of see yourself now.
So when I came into the OPCD, I was originally just signed up for an EDU 120 class. And it was the class I picked up because I had to fulfill a certain amount of credit hours. I heard really good things about the office and how I should really get on the process early. And I stepped in, and the first day, I noticed that I was around a bunch of sophomores, juniors, and even a senior at my table. I was kind of nervous. I was taken aback. But then I actually spoke with Miss Robinson. She was like, "You're here. I'm glad you're here. You're starting early, which is really important." So I thought that was great. And then Dylan mentioned this, so did Ainsley. I started creating my LinkedIn, my handshake, started going to different like basically career fairs. I went to a virtual one as well as an in-person one, a bunch of different events. And I think that it's really important, as when I started, I had nothing done. I came in, I was very nervous, and then I started making my resume, going to office hours. I feel as though I'm a bit more aware of what I want to do with my future, and I'm trying to get into it as I'm applying to internships. As Dylan was talking about, he got one his freshman year summer. And yeah, I think I'm way ahead of the game compared to where I was when I started.
I love hearing you talk about that, because I hear confidence in your voice. I hear it in Ansley, I hear it in Dylan, and it's because you all have put in the work. One of the things that Ansley and Jaden, you both referenced, was something called office hours. And some people think of that as just like formal, come in, meet with the professor solely, and have, might be kind of formal. Will you all speak to what office hours is and what it's like?
Yeah, so I could start. I think office hours, totally something that nobody should be afraid of. I basically walked in, it was informal. I sat down with Miss Robinson as well as other people in the office, and they really helped me attack. Like, the first thing I was working on was my LinkedIn profile. I was there for a couple weeks in a row, actually. I'd come every week for like 3-4 weeks. I just had to attack it and like really get it done. So I was working on assignments, which was basically like also built into my LinkedIn, because that was one of my assignments in the EDU 120 class. And I thought it was great. It was like so helpful, so many people there to help you out. Questions about anything really could be answered by anybody in the office hours room. So I thought that was really helpful, and it did me a lot at the start.
Well, and you know what you did? You got stuff done. So you came into office hours, we'd help you a little bit. You would hear other people talking, and that's helpful too. And Ansley, will you speak to that? Because there's this whole social piece and social learning that's taking place there.
Yes, definitely. So I remember coming into office hours for my first time, a little nervous, not really knowing what I was about to get myself into, just because I know my high school resume was so much different than my current one. And just being in the room with everyone, I remember overhearing one person talk about how she has so many internships lined up, like she knows what she's doing, she knows what she is going to do for her career. And I thought she was a senior because she has everything established. She has so many paths in motion right now. And then I started talking to her and realized that she's a sophomore, which I was very impressed by, and honestly gave me more, I guess, incentive to start doing that for myself and get my resume done, and then just keep building my own personal brand.
I love that you've both been in this kind of casual place where you can get things done and meet other people. And I think that's really important for first years too. I remember both of you sitting there and saying, "Oh, tell me about that internship," and sort of networking with one another, even though it just feels like it's a very social space. So thank you for letting first year parents know that that's an option for them, because I hope it's an open invitation. We love having everyone in there, particularly our first year students. All right, you all, you've given a lot of wisdom right here and a lot of good advice. What I would love to hear from each of you is, we're talking to parents who are interested in supporting their children and giving them good advice. And you really are, you're on the ground, so to speak. I wonder, Dylan, would you kick us off with giving some advice to parents of first years about how they can be supporting them?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, so I think one thing that I just want to advise, especially for parents, and from my own experience, I think parents should be there kind of to support their kids and their students, kind of with the career process as much as possible. So oftentimes I know that, especially with my family, with my dad as a doctor, kind of me interested in that pre-med path, it's really valuable to kind of hear firsthand his experiences, especially in fields that like I'm interested in as well. So whether that was, I got lucky that was my dad, but at the same time, oftentimes parents have friends and connections and other family members that kind of are in those spaces. So I think it's really valuable, just as I was talking about resources and connections here at Wake and with alumni, I think just in the same way, oftentimes with parents and families, it's incredibly valuable and important to kind of take advantage of those connections that you have as well, and kind of use all of those connections to your advantage, and really assist your student or your kid and kind of give them the most information that they possibly can get, and kind of talk to as many people as they can, and really learn from you, but also from others about what they're interested in those fields. Last thing I think that's really important is kind of this idea of, we've been talking about the OPCD and really getting on top of things and staying organized. So I would really tell your kids to stay organized, go to the OPCD. It's really not that scary, I promise. And go early. And I know at the end of the day, it's up to them to really be the organized one and be the one to take the initiative to go, but to kind of nudge them along in that path is definitely something that's important. So I know my parents did, so I may seem organized and seem like I took the initiative all by myself, but I have to give credit to my parents as well. So really put them on that path and make sure that they are on top of it as well, because it is really important and helpful.
I love it, Dylan. And I love that you're talking about, we've done that ally map. We've talked a little bit about that. And I love that you're surfacing that idea for people, that we have these allies who want to help us. And some of them are alumni, and we are certainly among them, and that there are those at home too. Thank you. All right, transitioning over to Ansley and Jaden. I know that you're also sitting there with some gems. Ansley, would you like to go first?
Yes, so my one piece of advice that I would give parents to then pass on to their students is to just be very adamant about helping them get their resume done. Like, make sure they at least get it done or have something there. That way they can go into office hours, meet with Heidi more to go over it, or if it's pretty finalized, to meet with I'm forgetting their title, I want to say resume editor.
That's right, the graduate career advisors. Mm-hmm.
Yes, just to have it finalized, because then it makes it so much easier to build your LinkedIn and build your Handshake, because then your profile is 100% completed and not like 50%, which potential employers could view as, okay, what's going on here? But it just really helps build your brand and is a perfect stepping stone to take as a first-year student.
Listen to how wise you've become in 90 days, Ansley. That was excellent. Thank you. Dylan and Ansley, Jaden, I'm going to have you teaching next semester. Jaden, I know you're waiting there with something to share as well.
Yeah, my one piece of advice, get your kids to step foot in the OPCD as much as possible, whether that's office hours, taking a class, EDU 120. Like I said before, I was kind of thrown into it. I'm so happy I was. I think that it does so much just for really starting the process. Like you were saying before, like getting your resume started, finishing up your resume. I think that that's so important. And whether it's you haven't even started yet or you're close to being done, just being in there really helps out. And yeah, that's what was most important to me, the class. And I think that just being a part of the group as much as possible, that was really important. Yeah.
I know your parents are with us on this panel, and I know that they are so proud, and I feel proud for you. You've done excellent work and you gave great advice. Thank you so much, Dylan, Ansley, and Jaden. We appreciate you being with us tonight and really appreciate your very, very wise advice for everyone. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jaden, Ainsley, and Dylan. Wow, I don't think we could give better advice than you all gave. So we won't give a whole lot more advice, but I'll just ask really quickly, Mercy, any final word or thought from your perspective that you want to add and share with our first year parents and families out there?
Yeah, I just really want to encourage everyone to think about building skills, particularly as a first-year student, and put less emphasis on brand of the organization, although that can be important. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing is students are able to articulate a story of what they've learned, what they've done, the kind of impact they've made, how they spend their time. So I just want to share that.
Thanks, Mercy. And then how about you, Heidi?
It's really hard to top those students. They really had a lot of good things to say. I think what I would do is emphasize some of the things that they said, which is that we're not scary. In fact, we have a pretty warm, opening place. You can hang out in here. We've got candy and the therapy dog, the works. So we just want your student to step in the door so that we can begin supporting them, because we know that you're supporting them from your side too.
Yeah, that's great. And I think I would just add that, college is a time where it's a time where you try a lot of things and you find out what you like and what you don't like. Oftentimes you might think you got it all figured out and then you find out you really don't. And so being able to just hold your student up when those moments happen and say, no worries, you've grown to a great school, you have a lot of people who can help you out, and it'll come together. The joy that honestly the three of us have getting to work with students and see the growth of them over their 4 years and how they become, like, really, honestly, they're beautiful students coming in, they're beautiful humans coming out. It's just really fun for us. And so for you as parents can just sort of keep the faith, know that it's going to happen. I keep encouraging them and don't create too much pressure on them. Just little nudges in the right kind of way. We'll be there for them to help them through the process, and it will work out. It'll really work out. So we are grateful to have the time with you tonight. We're really grateful for the students who joined us. They're amazing. Can't wait to sort of see where they all go. And they're actually another in their class, each of their classes, another almost 1,400 students just like them that we're helping out too. So thank you. Dusty, I don't know, you want to wrap up with a couple of final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists. I want to say thank you to you parents for joining us tonight. I hope that you're excited about the future of your Demon Deacons. I hope that you, if you didn't know already, know that there are people inside and outside of the classroom who are ensuring and dedicated to being sure that students thrive and they transform, and that the next 3.5 years are going to be amazing. I hope that you too feel a little more armed to encourage and to support your students to take advantage of the Office of Personal and Career Development and all of the resources that are available to them at Wake Forest University. We'll send out this recording as well as the links that were in the chat to those of you who were here tonight and those who were not able to join us. So if you want to rewatch and share some of those tips and tricks over the Thanksgiving break, you'll be ready to do it. Have a great evening.
Go Deeks.